This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Gridiron Heroics Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean, and we are here to recap the Week 13 slate of Sunday NFL games. With me, I have Kyron Samuels, former All-AFL offensive lineman and, of course, Division I offensive lineman at Jacksonville State. I also have Nick Merriam, who is our resident draft analyst. And we are going to talk about one of the better weekends of pro football that we've had so far this year. I'm not going to say it's the best. There's always recency bias, but it was a good one. Kyron, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good, man.
Nick, what about you, brother? You're refreshing yourself in Florida down there. I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I'm in Delray Beach. It's pretty nice down here. Weather's great. It was like 19 degrees when I left Philly, so yeah, a little bit of an upgrade, or at least now.
Yeah, weather's not bad here in Austin. I can't complain, but, I miss Florida here and there for sure. All right, guys. So we're going to talk about 6 games today, including Sunday Night Football. We're primarily going to focus on the games with the largest playoff implications. And, there were quite a few matchups that really made an impact on what we can expect going forward. So I think the first one, of course, look, before we jump into it, I really need to get better at doing this at the beginning of the show and the end of the show, but shout out to Noah Ashley, our producer. You can find him at Noah Ashley Sports, and he does so much for us to have a nice, smooth, functional show. So that being said, let's jump into it. So the first game that I'd like to talk about today is the Tennessee Titans at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this didn't necessarily look like two playoff teams going head-to-head, but it probably will be. One, obviously, in the AFC, the other in the NFC. The Eagles were clearly better, clearly the better team. They did have more mistakes and penalties, I felt like, but they just outclassed the Titans in quite a few different ways. I think this might have been Philly's most dominant win versus a probable playoff team up to this point. I mean, they were pretty decisive over the Vikings earlier this year, but that was a long time ago. The Vikings are a different team now. And I think the real takeaway from this game was that, especially I think you see this in college football too a lot, where a really, really good team closes on offensive players. Like they close downhill, whether it's from defensive backs or the linebackers. And the lesser teams chase defenders. There's a lot of, more horizontal tackling, chasing from behind. And that was just very, very evident, just even from any play you could pick off on either side of the ball, that's what you would see. So we have some, specific players we can highlight here. But Kyron, what were your main takeaways from this game?
Well, my main takeaway was there was 2 things. One, the Tennessee Titans really took away their run game, and that was actually, pretty surprising. They're one of the best running teams in the league. The Eagles had 24 carries for 67 yards. Not an effective day running the football. So the thing has always been make them beat you throwing the football. And Jalen Hurts has been the question mark. But I don't think you consider him a question mark anymore. He's proven time and time again over the course of even the last half of last year and all through this year that he can beat you throwing the football. He was 29 of 39, 380 yards against that defense and 3 touchdowns. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both had a monster day. So the fact that they were able to win without, going to their bread and butter, which is running the football, controlling the clock, staying ahead of the chains, was super impressive to me. And then conversely, on the other end, they held Derrick Henry to 30 yards. They held the Titans to 87 yards on 21 rushes. And you're starting to see the effects of, Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh and those guys that they went out and got. Those veteran additions have, proven to be very, very instrumental in shoring up the only question mark with that defense. They have really good back end. They have good linebackers. They have good edges. The only problem was the interior, and you're starting to see that starting to kind of look the way. If you can hold, Derrick Henry was second in the NFL in rushing. They're even still without Derrick Henry, they've still been very effective running the football. For them to hold them to 87 yards on 21 carries was extremely impressive. So finding a way to win on offense without your bread and butter, and then shutting down the best part of another team's offense, and showing up your only question mark on defense. I think they're the most complete team of football. I have been since week one. And I wasn't taking them seriously as a contender for a get to the Super Bowl early on, just because I thought they were a regular season team. But if this defense keeps stopping the run like this, you have to take them seriously, man. Nobody can stop these guys right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to be contenders. I mean, even when you consider, the Niners lose their quarterback yesterday, and it's just the NFC's wide open, and just getting to the Super Bowl in itself makes you have a great shot at winning it. So they're going to have that opportunity if they can get past Dallas, who we're going to talk about later, I believe. Maybe, I don't know. Actually, I don't remember what games we talked about, but it might be on the docket. But this is the kind of the limiting factor with the Titans, right? And the way they've designed their football team, and we've talked about previously on the show. They are a physical team first, and injuries have come from that because every year they've been a team that's kind of led the league in injuries because of how they play the game. And I think when you get in these games where it's kind of opened up a little bit and becomes a track meet and you need to chase, I don't think Ryan Tannehill's a bad quarterback, but it's just how much do you trust him to be the guy that we've kind of talked about Jalen Hurts maybe struggling to be, kind of the guy that you drop back 40 times in a game and just have you win these shootouts. And without Derrick Henry kind of dictating the game on the offensive side, they don't have the play action as much. It's a problem for them. And I think they went up against a team here who physically on the defensive side is up to the challenge. Tennessee's run blocking unit's always been better than its pass blocking unit. I think that was a problem as well. And look, Philly, I don't know if I'm all the way in on Jalen Hurts yet. The issue is when you commit like 8 guys to the run game, and now you got, one-on-one with Smith and A.J. Brown on the outside, and you're just trusting kind of your back three with your free safety to make those plays defensively. We saw with Washington, and I know I always come back to Washington. I'm sorry about this, but it doesn't take a whole. I think Dallas to an extent too when they play them. It doesn't. You need to have some skill on the back end there to be able to just disrupt their ability to kind of use play action, just throw the ball downfield, because that's their answer for this. Is the Eagles just want to throw up jump balls to A.J. Brown, and if you're playing Avery, I don't remember, I think that's his name, the corner for the Titans, and he's one-on-one trying to defend A.J. Brown, you're okay throwing up that 50-50 ball. He's going to make the catch and did in this game. So you have to have the personnel defensively to force them to pass the ball and then feel good at least that a 50-50 ball is actually going to be a 50-50 ball to A.J. Brown. And, the Titans didn't have that, and it showed today.
Yeah, well, I think my trust in Jalen Hurts is progressing week by week. You say that Ryan Tannehill is maybe not a guy that you necessarily trust to drop back 40 times. Well, I think he just never developed into that, and he still isn't that. I think Jalen Hurts is developing into that before our very eyes. And yes, you made some good points, but that stat line, 29 of 39, that is not just jump balls. That is a very, very effective passer that's very, very efficient. And, Kyron, they did take away the running game, but also Philly made a concerted effort not to run the football with Hurts. They clearly are trying to back off that. They're seeing guys get hurt around the league who are doing that. Justin Fields, and we saw Lamar Jackson go down today. Obviously, that didn't specifically influence their decision, but they were able to pass the ball effectively and then run the ball with Hurts in very specific situations. They were able to score off of a quarterback run, but they were able to get it done through the air, and they looked awesome. I mean, honestly, I do feel like the fronts ruled the day for the Eagles on both sides of the ball. They may not have run the ball super effectively just because Tennessee made such an effort to block it up. But in the pass game, Hurts had time for the most part, and defensively, they did get after it. I mean, they had sacks all over the place, and even when they weren't getting sacks, they were still impacting the play. I mean, Josh Sweat, 2 sacks, Javon Hargrave, a sack that Hassan Reddick ran him right into. Hassan Reddick, I think he had his own sack. Fletcher Cox had his sack, chasing Tannehill out of the pocket, looking pretty fast for a 30-plus-year-old defensive tackle. But and Brandon Graham had a sack as well. So they were getting after it. I think they did a really nice job. James Bradbury and Darius Slay doing a nice job on the back end too. So I think you're right. I think they are the most complete team in the NFL. And even if Jalen Hurts is never going to be Patrick Mahomes, he's getting a lot closer to that now than he was when he started the season. So I mean, I'm impressed with this team. I thought they went in, they took care of business, and they basically dominated throughout the entire game. Kyron, do you have anything else you wanted to add to this game?
Not really, man. I'm just impressed. Like I said, both Churches dominated the game for them, and Jalen Hurts is just finding a way every week to be consistent. I mean, he has 29 touchdowns, over 3,600 yards already, and only 3 turnovers. So after a 12-game sample size, you can kind of put him up there with the elite. He should be 1, 2, 3 in the MVP conversation, somewhere in there. However you want to put him there, he's there. And I hate the excuse that everybody's using that he has talent around him. Like Patrick Mahomes doesn't have loaded offense. Like Josh Allen doesn't have, supreme personnel. It's not about the talent around him. It does help for sure, but he's making the plays, he's making the throws, he's making the right reads, and he's getting the ball to everybody. It's not just going to one guy. AJ Brown has 950 yards. Devontae Smith has 711 yards. Goddard, before he went out, was close to 500 yards. He's spreading the ball around to everybody. Quez Watkins has been a big part of this offense the last month of the season. So he's getting the ball to everybody. He's doing a damn good job, and I feel like he deserves a little bit more credit.
Yep. I mean, yeah, he's getting closer to those elite quarterbacks. I need to see what we talked about with Tannehill a little bit. That's all. And I just think this Titans back seven is not one that I'm like, I think he should beat them up a little bit. Carson Wentz threw for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns against his defense. Like, I'm not like, this isn't the game that solidifies Jalen Hurts MVP for me. He's in the race for certain. And I think the Eagles are Super Bowl contenders. But I still think their game plan going forward is not going to be one where they're asking Hurts to do this every game.
It's fair. It's not a stellar defensive backfield for them, and they are banged up, certainly. So, I mean, again, I hear you in the sense that this game maybe isn't what solidifies him as the MVP. I mean, he's not my MVP either way, but the fact that him running the ball has been such a big part of his game, and he was able to run 5 times for like 14 yards, basically, and that didn't need to be the way that they won at all. It's definitely a step in the right direction. And I'm glad that at the very least, the Eagles were wise enough to say, we don't have to run the ball with him. Let's not even try. Let's preserve his body for the playoff run. And I will just shout out the receivers too. I mean, Devontae Smith was getting open all day. Beautiful route running to start things off. Then I think kind of late in the first quarter, getting into the second quarter is when AJ Green stepped in and kind of took over with his physicality, and he's become quite a good route runner as well. I mean, the way that he was just beating press and then just stacking and getting deep it's kind of stuff that we haven't seen. You know what I mean? Like, he was always a good deep receiver, but it was a little bit more physicality than route running before, and that's developed quite well. So he was always my favorite of those 2019 receivers, but he's become very, very good. But we'll talk about another one of those guys here in just a moment, because we are going to switch over to the Washington Commanders at the New York Giants. So, it kind of only felt right that these two teams ended in a tie. I mean, I felt like it fit the matchup. It fit the storyline for both of these teams right now. You know what I mean? 3/4 of the way through the season, a divisional matchup. Neither team has really, stamped their seal yet, and it ends in a tie. So, two defenses stylistically quite different, but both were effective in this game. Washington kind of distributing the ball more to their playmakers. New York relying more heavily on Saquon Barkley. The game ends with Jahan Dotson scoring on a really beautiful play. He gets the ball, puts a beautiful spin move on, jets to the end zone to tie it up, and then nobody can get it done in overtime. The Giants miss a field goal basically right at the end, so it's 20-20. And you saw the flashes of how both teams have been winning, and no one could just quite get it done today. Do you have any big takeaways, Kyron?
Not really, other than the fact that both of these defensive fronts are just really, really good. Like, that's what stood out that game. I think there was a total of 9 sacks in this game, if I'm not mistaken. So just watching both of those fronts get after it was really impressive. I do think just watching the Giants defense, they've really missed Xavier McKinney and Adoree Jackson. Those two guys are instrumental for them. And a lot of the stuff that Washington was able to do in the past game, I don't think would have been there with a guy like X on the field. He's a Pro Bowl caliber guy, fringe All Pro guy. I think he's one of the best safeties in the game that nobody really talks about. And also Adoree has just been playing very good football, forcing a lot of takeaways, just being where he's supposed to be and making it more difficult, especially for a guy like Taylor Heineke, who's very, very he has a lot of moxie. Like, he extends plays. He can make a lot of stuff happen, but he will give you one. He will put the ball in harm's way. And that's a part of I like Taylor Heineke a lot, because that's a part of what makes him so fun to watch. And that's what part of what makes that team successful is his ability to extend plays and just, play backyard football a lot of the times. But I think that's what's going to prevent them from being, serious contenders and getting over a hump in a playoff game per se. I think that he would put the ball in harm's way too many times. And when those guys aren't on the field that can take advantage of those, I think that was one of my biggest takeaways. And also just the fact that Brian Robertson Jr. Is having a pretty dang good year. For him, recovering from getting shot, coming back at this point of the season, I think he went for 21 carries, 96 yards yesterday. He's at 563 yards for this season. So for him to be, making that headway after missing those games and kind of recovering from that, it's pretty impressive to me. And I think that going forward, I wasn't expecting him to have that kind of success. He's an Alabama guy. Obviously, I love Alabama and everything. I was expecting him to be a solid short yardage back, kind of just still the number one guy. But he's looking like he could potentially be a number one running back in this league and do so for a few years. So I was kind of surprised to see him recover from that and, be as productive as he has been, because I wasn't expecting that for him healthy.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm going to talk about this game from the Washington perspective. I'll try my best not to do too much of that. But this was a tough one. You kind of got what you wanted from Washington in this game and lost because quite frankly, and I know the Giants were beat up. Washington got a little beat up in this game as well, and it made these teams kind of equal. I thought you limited the run game to an extent. Daniel Jones had a good game running the ball, but a lot of it was scrambles, which has kind of become a thing that is a big part of the Giants' offense, is his ability to extend the play and take yardage, which you can't fall for. It's a tough thing to defend against when you've got good coverage, and then quite honestly, Daniel Jones is a better athlete than we give him credit for, and still is, and is able to get those yards. And that was a big part of their offense. Both teams force a turnover in opponent territory, leads to points. Both teams miss a field goal. But other than that, I thought Washington was getting more push from their front four. I thought, Taylor Heineke was making better decisions with the ball. The receivers were making missed tackles, which were giving them more yardage after catch early in the game, which gave them that early lead. And then, Daniel Jones completes 80% of his passes in this game and throws for 200 yards, it was under 6 yards a throw, maybe just over. Right. One of the passes was for 55 yards. So think about that. He completes about over 80% of his other passes and averages probably around 4 yards of completion on that. So they're really just throwing it to the running backs, checking it down. And the issue with that is the one ball is your 7th round rookie corner, Christian Holmes, is starting because Benjamin St. Juste is hurt, and he can't stay up on a jump ball against Darius Slayton. And then you've got him covering Isaiah Hodgins, and he can't even cover Isaiah Hodgins. So that was a weakness for them in this game. The Giants' pass rush really started going after Sam Cosmi and Tyler Larson both went down for Washington. That interior just got beat up. And I'm worried about them going forwards because even after those injuries, we saw that Washington did not trust Taylor Heineke at all. They just wanted to run the ball. They had 1st and 10 in opponent territory in overtime, and they just wanted to run the ball. And you go backwards on 1st down, 2nd and 12, you run the ball again, which to me was mind-boggling. And then 3rd and 12, they throw a screen pass. They still won't throw the ball down the field when you're close to a field goal because they don't trust Heineke's ability to push it downfield. And they just can't run it because you're so beat up now that you're on Wes Martin, who is, a practice squad player at center. And then I think Sadiq Charles, who's a fine run blocking guard, not much of a pass protector. They were behind the 8 ball here on the offensive line and will be going forwards because it looks like Larson just broke his foot. So we're on our 3rd center now. I don't know. It's frustrating. They've done a good job schematically making this offense one where you can design the run game to work and then give Heineke, easy decisions to get to the ball to open receivers who can make plays. But at some point here, they might need to open it up more. A lot of fans screaming for Carson Wentz. I'm not there. I think it's ridiculous. I think that this game probably they lose if Carson Wentz is a starter because there are multiple plays where Heineke extends the play and makes a throw because he has that ability and Wentz doesn't. But this is a tough one for this team because they're just They had a winning record, but I don't think this is a good football team. I don't think the Giants are either, and I think it's a product of the NFC being not very good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love the Commanders' skill players. They don't have a real true burner, like a true burner Z type, but they have pretty much everything else and kind of in excess. I mean, between Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, and then Antonio Gibson is kind of like the receiving back. That is a really like nice, versatile receiving core. Brian Robinson was kind of that missing piece as a more bruising back, and he seems to be coming on more and more. And he can catch the ball too if necessary. It is kind of frustrating to see all those guys playing the way that they are and not having the guy getting them the ball at least enough to win this game. I mean, I don't want to pile on too hard because the situation is what the situation is. And I think if you don't have that bomb to Darius Slayton, that does change the way that this game unfolds, because that's a big chunk of yardage that I just don't know if the Giants necessarily get otherwise. It's kind of a moment where you're like realizing that some of the depth is limited here for the Commanders, where it would have been really nice if that William Jackson signing had worked out, or some other corner would have worked out. But it is what it is, and they're still in the running for this game. I mean, for the season, they're still in the running to make the playoffs. They're just on the outside now of the Seahawks, but despite the Seahawks beating up on the Rams this past week, I'm not necessarily sure that they are super sustainable either. I think we've seen some warts with them. From the Giants' perspective, I mean, I think you got to give them credit for what they've done throughout this season in this game. When you're relying so exclusively on Saquon Barkley to be like your big time threat, and then Daniel Jones to dink and dunk and run the ball. I mean, Daniel Jones is basically with a way better arm, basically playing at a level that Jalen Hurts was maybe at the beginning of last year. So we've seen this skill set, this type of player develop in one situation and really not in another. I don't know if he'll ever get there. I mean, I would say not at this point, but it's not like he's had a good situation, right? You know what I mean? Now that Dable's there, maybe you wonder, maybe they bring him back if they don't have access to a quarterback in another way, and we see if he can become that guy that's more efficient and then does rely on running the ball effectively. But we'll see. I mean, when I watched that missed kick at the end of the game, I was kind of shaking my head like this feels right. It's frustrating, but it feels right at the same time. You guys have anything else on this game before we roll on to another AFC NFC crossover?
I don't. Do you have anything, Nick?
No, I mean, I just hope that Benjamin St. Juste being back in the next game, Washington gets a bye here to kind of get healthy, and maybe Chase Young's back too, and that makes a difference. But I just, it's not like home field advantage has been great for Washington, so I don't know if that really changes anything, and we'll see. This isn't a team to me that is going on the road and winning a playoff game. So it's like, you're playing for the 7 seed, but cool. I don't know how much that does for you.
Well, I mean, if you end up playing the Buccaneers, then maybe we'll see. Ron Rivera's always played well. But regardless, let's move on from recapping your favorite game or your favorite team to my favorite team. The New York Jets went into Minnesota and lost. And I have to say, overall, I was really not upset with the outcome of this game. Yeah, sure, you would have wanted to win, but I think under the circumstances, the play from Mike White overall gives you optimism throughout the rest of the year. It's a good team that they faced. They were able to limit Justin Jefferson to about 45 yards and a touchdown. And yes, he was very impactful. I mean, there were other plays made by guys specifically because the defense was keying in on Justin Jefferson. So, they weren't able to just completely shut him down. He had some drive sustaining catches. There was one on 3rd down. It was only like 5 yards, but it kept that drive moving. But overall, the fact that he didn't absolutely go off gives you a lot of optimism. And then on the other side of the ball, I mean, you've got guys making plays. Garrett Wilson has 162 yards or something like that, over 160 yards. So there's a lot of positivity there. I think you do have to give the Vikings credit, though. Their defense played better today than it has in a while. And I think even though they gave up quite a few yards to Garrett Wilson, they made it hard. They made it really challenging. And really what this game came down to is that the Jets had so many trips inside the red zone that they just couldn't capitalize on. There were at least 3 red zone drives where they had to kick field goals, and one where they got 0 points because there was a drop on 4th down. So basically, I mean, that is almost 20 points just left on the board in a game where they lost by 5. So if you score a touchdown in even one of those situations, it just puts you in a different spot when the game is concluding. And if you can score maybe on 2 of them, then the game is in your favor. So they matched up well. They just couldn't close it out. This probably is the story of the Jet season at this point. Better than we all expected. Probably not quite good enough to get it done. And then we'll give Mike White a few more weeks to kind of prove that maybe he should get a shot at this next year. I'll have some thoughts on Mike White, but I'll throw it to you guys first to give your thoughts. I know you're not a big Jets fan, Kyron, but how do you feel about them now that Zach Wilson is not in the lineup?
I mean, a lot better, but I don't think Kirk Cousins played a very good game yesterday at all.
No.
And I think you got to give I'll put like 40% of that. Just give credit to the Jets. Saleh gives you a lot of looks. He gives you they dial up a lot of pressures. They're very good at what they do on defense, but Kirk just flat out missed a ton of throws yesterday. He wasn't very good, and that's kind of my concern with the Vikings when it matters. I don't trust Kirk Cousins to be good enough to beat any of those teams in the playoffs. I think this is the first round exit waiting to happen. Unless they get a bye, then they'll get a second round. I think whoever they play in the playoffs first round, I do not trust them to win. Simply because, and I like Kirk. Don't get me wrong. Kirk's one of the most fun people to watch. He's one of the most fun people to go look at the tape and watch that film and see what he did that week. I like Kirk Cousins a lot, and he's a lot better than people give him credit for. I think he's right in that 9 to 13 range with Dak Prescott and Kyler Murray and those guys in that range. Kirk is not far behind those guys. I mean, he's probably the worst out of that group, but he's in that group. And I don't think he quite gets enough. He doesn't get quite enough credit, but I don't think he played very good yesterday. I think the Jets moved the ball very well. I don't think the Jets' red zone play calling was very good at all. You can't get to the red zone that many times and then falter, especially at the end of the game. You know, no matter what happened the rest of the game, you have a chance to take that lead twice. You get the ball twice with a chance to go take the lead and win that game. And it's just, I know Mike White is an intriguing prospect here, but Mike White should never throw a ball 57 times in a game. It's not a recipe for success. He threw for 57 times for 369 yards and 2 interceptions. It's not something that's conducive to winning. You move the ball a lot, but you put the ball in his hands too many times. Lean on the run game. I mean, I didn't even know who the kid was coming in the game, but Zonovan Knight, he had 15 carries for 90 yards. Maybe get him to 25 and you win that game. That's 10 less, throws for Mike White, 10 more carries. It kind of balances it out a little bit more. I think there's just, you lean a little bit too heavy on Mike White. The receivers are going to be happy. I mean, the receivers are having, bigger days than they've had all season, but is it going to help you win football games at the end of the day? And I don't think that it's going to help them win very much going forward. I mean, you look at the rest of the Jets schedule here, and then I'll pass it off to Nick. You have the Bills, you have the Lions who are playing damn good football. You have the Jaguars who can catch fire at any moment. The Jaguars offense is playing really well. And then you have the Seahawks who are going to be a playoff team and the Dolphins who are going to be a playoff team. You don't have any leeway here the rest of the way. And you have to find a balance between this offense because they don't have any balance. You're moving the ball a lot. The receivers get a little bit more happy. You run the ball pretty efficiently. You got to find ways to score touchdowns, and you got to find ways to take care of the ball better, or it's going to get pretty ugly here the rest of the way. But one thing that we got to give credit to the Jets about, their defense is going to make it hard on anybody to score points, and you got to be ready to bring your hard hat on the opposing offense every week. So I'll give them that for sure. And I still think they're a quarterback and offensive line being healthy away. But those are 2 fixable things for them.
Yeah, Max, we're gonna be holding on for dear life in the end here, aren't we? This is gonna be fun. This roster to me in New York is one that I think if you're a quarterback, you have to be excited about maybe going. I think what we thought Denver was last year, and Russell Wilson went there, and we're like, oh my God, Denver has all these pieces, and we were probably wrong about that. Their O-line had more issues than we thought. I think their front four has been good, not great, and I think their weapons have not quite shown up to the degree we hoped. Though maybe thinking Russell Wilson was going to be great was part of the thinking there. The Jets have it. I mean, Garrett Wilson, stud, superstar. That guy's awesome. This game was more about him, in my opinion, than anything else on that offense. Just getting the ball in his hands and really flipped the game, I think, to giving the Jets an opportunity to win. Zonovan Knight has been another piece that they've just found here. And I think it's kind of, you find these zone rushers pretty easily, I think. And he was another 6th rounder that I liked kind of coming out of NC State as a guy that just, he's not a great tackle breaker, but he has burst. And if he can read the hole and just hit it, you're going to get yards from that. And he has been able to do that for the Jets. They're going to have that until Breece Hall comes back next year. I think they're going to be fine at running back this year. And again, this team just continues to build on what they've created in terms of a roster. And I think all the signs right now are good. I think regardless of this team making the playoffs or not, this has been a successful season, in my opinion, for the Jets. On the other side of it, Kirk Cousins, we need to just throw him in the injury tent, and every time it's their ball, we need to just be like, all right, Kirk, we're down 7. Don't look at the scoreboard. We're down 7. Go out there, because the guy just, when he has a lead, does not push the ball down the field. He won't. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but we've seen the Kirk Cousins trying to air it out when the game's close and you're trying to duel with another quarterback. The guy's capable of just throwing for 400 yards on a limb. And sometimes he's just nothing. Today was a 0 from Kirk Cousins as far as I'm concerned. And we get these games, and it's probably not completely connected to his aggression, but there has to be something said for the fact that the games where he is struggling are the games where he is trying to just find the safe throws, and then the Jets are sitting on it, and they're like, we're not going to let you take that. And he just goes 21 for 35 and has a yards per attempt less than 6 yards. He's almost stubborn in the fact that when they have the lead, he doesn't want to take chances. And that's fine when you're Taylor Heineke, but when you're Kirk Cousins and you have Justin Jefferson, sometimes you just got to give the guy a chance to catch the ball.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he did get one deep shot down to Jalen Reagor, but for the most part, I think part of the reason that he did that, at least in this game, is because the Jets made that effort to keep Justin Jefferson short. I mean, the guy is unbelievable. He really, really is. I mean, on that touchdown that he had against DJ Reed, he doesn't look like a human the way he moves. He as he gets his release, he comes up vertically to the defensive back who has slight inside leverage, and then he's just standing vertically, and then he's just and his whole body just kind of slides into his cut, and it's so sudden at the same time. It's truly bizarre to watch. He's unbelievable. So he can hurt you short. He can, beat you up for, I don't know, he had a good number of receptions, I think, but what was it? He had 7 receptions for 45 yards. So it's he's involved. He just didn't go deep on you the way that we've been seeing him do for these past few weeks. From the Jets' perspective, I mean, first of all, Kyron, I 100% agree with you. You got 5 yards of carry. You know what I mean? You have a 48-yard explosive rush with Zonovan Knight, or Bam Knight is what they call him. And, he's exactly what they needed once they lost Breece Hall, because they have Michael Carter, who's, a good receiving back. He can get you a few yards after contact. Got good contact balance. They've got Ty Johnson, who can do a little bit here and there, but they didn't have that real explosive guy, and they needed that. And so the fact that they've had him on the practice squad since they took him undrafted has been a nice little injection. The one thing that I don't really necessarily agree with you about is that even though I felt like they should have run the ball more, I didn't feel like putting the ball in Mike White's hands 57 times was necessarily a recipe for a loss, because he played well given the circumstances. The two interceptions, I wouldn't really say either one was his fault. One was on one of the first throws of the game. He hit Corey Davis basically in the chest, and it was contested because the DB basically came through from behind, but it just popped up. It popped up and Harrison Smith grabbed it. So decision wise, it was either, generally speaking, that's either a catch or just an incompletion. And he faced a number of other drops in this game. Tyler Conklin, I think Corey Davis might have had one other drop. And then the drop in the end zone on 4th down to win the game by Braxton Berrios. I mean, again, it's like that ball is basically where it needed to be safe. And Braxton Berrios comes down with that ball 9 times out of 10. And the final pick, it's 4th down, and basically it's like 10 seconds left. So they have no option to like throw the ball short. He has to sling it to the end zone. I mean, it's, basically a Hail Mary short of a Hail Mary. So I think from an ideological perspective, you could win that way. You just need your receivers to be a little bit more on point with the drops, a little bit more on point, not tipping the ball up. And you don't need to win that way. If you have a run game, you shouldn't be getting away from it. But I just feel like if it came down to it, he actually could win you a game like that. I mean, I think that's how he won the game against the Bengals last year, like a ridiculous number of pass attempts. So that's my spiel on the Jets offense. I will say the one thing about Mike White, he's got a good arm in terms of velocity and accuracy. The place where he lacks is anytime he has to throw with any platform that's not basically like perfect, he has a real hard time with that. And so depending on the situation, it could get real ugly. And he's also doesn't really have great deep touch. So if he has to like maneuver a ball into a specific place that's not via a line drive, he's not the best at that. I think that's probably something he could get better at. The off-platform stuff, that's probably never going to change.
Sounds like early Kirk Cousins, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think he could get better at it. I think, he's better at it already this year than he was last year, but it's still like an issue with his game. You don't see a lot of loop to his balls, and like, sometimes you consider that a good thing, but I just don't think that he does it when he should do it, or when it would make the ball more easily catchable from a receiver. Like you'll see him miss on some deep throws just because the ball is a little bit too linear. Doesn't really give his receiver quite enough time to run underneath it. And I think that he would benefit from that. They missed a deep touchdown to Garrett Wilson just through their fingertips exactly that way. A little more loft, that's probably a touchdown. So that's that's all I will say about the Jets in this game. They are still in the 7th seed, so hopefully they can maintain it. But Kyron, you're right. It is not an easy stretch. Anything else that you guys want to mention about this one before we move on to Kyron's favorite team?
No, I'm okay on this one.
Yeah, I'm good on this one.
All right. All righty. The Miami Dolphins go into the San Francisco 49ers, and obviously there are 2 big storylines to this game. The first one is that Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt early and is going to miss the rest of the season, I believe, with multiple broken bones in his foot. And the other is that this is probably the worst game that we have seen Tua Tagovailoa play this year. And, there was just a good solid stretch after the first play of the game offensively for the Dolphins to about, I don't remember exactly when he kind of turned it on a little bit more, maybe like halfway through the 3rd quarter, where he was just inaccurate. His balls were just a little bit out of reach. I think the windows were tighter. It's really hard to throw the ball past and over these linebackers because they just come from depth and get depth so quickly for San Francisco that it was a challenge for him. And not that he can't do it, but I think it's maybe the first time he's had to do it this year, and he didn't necessarily respond the best. Did have another nice deep throw to Tyreek Hill in what was essentially basically a busted coverage because Hufanga got too aggressive, came up forward, and left space down the middle of the field. And but it just wasn't enough as the game wore on. He ended up turning the ball over again via fumble and interception, and then eventually they put Skylar Thompson in as the game got out of reach within about 2 minutes left to go, and he threw his own pick himself. So I don't know if there's that much to take away from this long term, except that it's really the first wart on the season that we've seen from Tua. And I don't know that we can like consider this any indication of what he will do going forward, but I will definitely hope that he gets his offensive line back healthier, because I think that's another part of the reason that he felt uncomfortable in this game. So we can talk about Brock Purdy in a minute, but I'm going to throw it to Kyron for his thoughts on how Tua performed and the Dolphins in general.
So I thought, the first play of the game went very well, obviously. And then after that, like you said, from about the second drive, the second and third drive were pretty bad, 2-3 and outs there. But the throws were there. He just flat out missed one.
Right.
He missed the bad. He skipped one to Waddle. He's rolling out, and he skipped one to Tyreek. But there was another one where Jeff Wilson, he's going out and he's running up the seam free, and it's not a perfect ball, but it's a ball that has been caught all season. It's a ball that most people make 9 times out of 10, and little things like that were happening that I think like compounded the way Tua was playing and feeling. Like he's missing throws, then he finally puts one that's there, and then the guy doesn't make the play for him. Little things like that I felt really like bad about. So I'm watching it. I'm a little upset. And then they come back for the fourth drive. Tua's making the throws. He's hitting the ball. He's finding his guys. And then on 3rd and 1, inside the red zone, Mike McDaniel overthinks it and calls a bootleg to Nick Bosa's side. But it's just flabbergasting. Like, it's 3rd and 1. You got 2 downs to get 1 yard, run the football. So I think that drive was very important to me. Because you have the chance to tie. You have the chance to take the lead, go up 14-10. Instead, you tie, and it kind of just kills the momentum. That's a huge play for that defense. It's another play that's in Tua and the offensive line's mind. I just didn't really appreciate that play calling. And then you come back second half, and he throws the pick. It was like, you can't get much worse than it is right now. You're playing the number 1 defense in the league on the road in a ball game where you're not out of yet. But after the second pick, it's 23-10. They start to figure it out. They put it all together. And I think that was the most important thing I took away from this game, is the kid figured it out. And that was like the most encouraging thing I've seen from Tua all season. And I normally there's no more victories in football to me. You had a chance to win this ball game, which I'll get to in a second, but you saw the light click. You saw the switch go off where he settled in, figured it out. Even before the pass to Tyreek, he started to find his guys. They were backed up on their own. They were backed up inside their own 20. He starts to hit the throws. He hits Tyreek a couple times. He found River Craycraft over the middle one time. He hit Durham Smythe, starting to get out a little bit. And then you saw the lights start to roll for him. He finishes 18 for 33 for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Like I said, that was the most encouraging thing for me. He found a way to figure it out, and he started to make the throws. After everything that was said, it was 23-17, and they have the ball with a chance to go not win the football game essentially, but take the lead and put all the pressure on Brock Purdy and that offense for the 49ers. And he takes the ball down the field. That Trent Sherfield drop was pretty bad. That's the ball that should have been caught. They ended up reviewing that ball and taking it away. And then he has to convert the 4th down, and he finds Tyreek, which almost like made me jump out of my chair, like, just run to it. But I can see why. If anybody is shell shocked from running the football in the NFL right now, you can understand this too, right? You've been put out of 2 ball games this year, but he finds a way to take that team down the field. They're in opposing territory. I think they're close to the 30 going in with the chance to with the chance to take the lead. And Drake Greenlaw just makes a damn good play. I mean, I think that's a ball Mike Gesicki should catch. But the overall point that I'm making is, after everything that happened, it's 23-17. Your quarterback's taking you down the field, and he's making the plays in crunch time and finding a way to get it done. And the cookie just doesn't crumble your way. If Mike Gesicki makes that catch, who knows what happens after that? But the point is that he responded, and he found a way to get it done. I at least have a chance to get it done, which I can take, because nobody is as good as those guys on defense. Like, nobody has the linebacking core that the 49ers have. Nobody has a Nick Bosa on their team. I was very, very impressed with that second half offensively, and I was not very impressed with the defense all day. But I also feel like a lot of tough calls went against them. That pass interference was pretty bad. Just a couple of non-holding calls. I just don't think that you can expect to leave your defense out on the field that much and not give up points and not give up some yards. I do think they have to play better. There's no reason Brock Purdy should, and Brock Purdy didn't do anything crazy. Let's not get out of hand here. Like he put the ball where the ball was supposed to be. They had a couple penalty extended drive extended penalties. I just don't think that it was a great performance from the defense, but I'm not going to pile on them too much. They did score a defensive touchdown as well. I think overall the biggest thing I took away from this game was Tua finding a way to respond when a lot of quarterbacks just go into the tank. Even guys that I've seen Aaron Rodgers this year throw 2 picks and go into the tank and then play terrible for the rest of the game. I've seen it from a lot of guys, but he responded and gave the team a chance to win in the fourth quarter. There's 5 minutes left. It's 23-17, and he has the ball going in. To me, that was like the most important part of this game. And now you just got to prove it next week. You have another opportunity in prime time against the Chargers, against Justin Herbert and those guys, against the defense that's nowhere near as good. Go shut people up. It was a difficult game first half. You found a way second half. And the only other thing I'll add is that you have to find some kind of consistency in the run game. I mean, 8 carries for 33 yards is just, you can't win football games like that. And I understand, and it's not even like they were playing from behind so much where it was out of reach and you had to throw the ball so much. Like I said, it's 23-17. You got a chance to win the game. So you had a chance to run the ball and kind of establish a little bit there, but they didn't even try. I mean, I just don't think it was something that they believed that they could do. So I'll get off the soapbox there. But like I said, I was upset the first half. Like these guys just aren't playing well. But the fact that they had a chance to win that ball game at the end says a lot about that team. And also says a lot about how good the 49ers are on defense. So I got to give them a ton of credit for what they did.
Yeah, I mean, quick take for the Niners is just that I think it's impressive that Shanahan gets this offense to work regardless of who the quarterback's been. We saw with Nick Mullins, like they gave themselves an opportunity playing important games down the stretch. Brock Purdy may assimilate to be something similar to Nick Mullins. We'll see. They're in a good spot to make the playoffs already, which is tough because there aren't a lot of answers there at quarterback besides Purdy, and I don't know who else is out there, but they're gonna have to make do with what they have, and we'll see. I mean, obviously he did enough to win this game, and that's what they're going to ask going forward, is that the running the ball and the defense can do enough, and that they have enough weapons to make it work. Makes the McCaffrey deal look tough right now because, regardless of what player you traded for, you traded a bunch of picks to win now this year. And a quarterback injury derails that. And it's difficult as a San Francisco fan, I would assume, to be in this spot because this was a Super Bowl caliber team. And now I don't know what their ceiling is now. From Miami's perspective, this is an organizational win today, I think, in terms of Tua, just because we often talk about in scouting how it's difficult to scout quarterbacks just on physical tools, decision-making, productivity, because you need to take a guy that the entire organization is willing to work with, coaching, management. Like everyone needs to be in on a guy. I think to this point, Tua, Mike McDaniel have worked very well together. Obviously, the organization drafted him, so the management likes him. The ability for him to now be stuck in a situation where their talent level, because Teron Armstead's injured, Jalen Waddle goes down. I know they still had Tyreek Hill, but it's similar to what they've had in previous years, maybe a little better. And we can see kind of Tua playing a little bit like we had seen him play in previous years, where he kind of shells up when things get a little difficult. And then he comes back and he just starts pushing the ball down the field and making a couple throws to keep them in this game and really making this a competitive football game despite the shortcomings that come from injuries. It was a gutty performance from him. And I think it's something that they will grow from. And he's your guy. Like it's been apparent at this point that he is, but it's just, when these things happen, when you're short of a tackle, when you're short of a receiver, that's when the quarterback position is so important, because you just need a guy to be able to overcome all of that, despite the fact that, you got pressure in your face all the time. It's Nick Bosa, and it's, you're throwing it into a defensive structure for D'Amico Ryans. It makes it very difficult to, consistently make the right decisions. But, this offense has just been designed well from the beginning. Tua has worked well in it. He's confident now, and you saw that today, despite everything that he had to deal with, and I think he should be applauded for that. Now, the negative to that is I don't know how long we're away from Teron Armstead getting back, but I think he needs to get back, and I think we saw this against Houston last week. Man, I like Tua. I think he's better maybe in the pocket than people give him credit for, but I don't want him running for his life on every play, and it's like the offense does a good job of keeping him from doing that. There's a lot of quick read stuff, a lot of stuff that gets the defense pulling left and right, read options and such. That go into throwing plays, a lot of motion. but you can't run that stuff all game. They haven't been a team that's been like a run the ball 40 times a game type team, and I don't think they want to be based on the way they've played to this point. Hopefully Jalen Waddle's good too. I haven't checked on that injury, but this is a team that very much lives through their best players. And I'd be unfortunate if they didn't have those players going to the playoffs, because I want to see them at full strength, because this is a really like fun team for me. Like, I like watching the Dolphins, and same with the Niners. We lost one, I think, here with Brock Purdy. I hope we don't lose two with all the Dolphins injuries, but I think Armstead's going to be all right, right? Isn't he coming back at some point?
Yeah, he'll be back in. The diagnosis was 3 to 4 weeks, so he's 2 weeks into that recovery. He should be back for at least the Patriots game. So you got to go against the Chargers, maybe the Bills, maybe the Packers without him. But
you don't really,
yeah. So I think the good thing for them is they had a lot of opportunities yesterday. And you're not going to play a defense as good as the 49ers the rest of the way. You're just not. And the fact that you were able to move the ball, you put up more points on them than they've had put up in 2 months. They hadn't given up an offensive touchdown in almost 2 full games. They haven't given up a second half touchdown in over a month. And they found a way. Like I said, first play of the game, touchdown. Second half, they threw the ball for almost 200 yards in that second half. So it was a very encouraging effort on a lot of fronts. But it's also like you got to be able to get off the field on third down. Third down defense was terrible yesterday. And I think that was the biggest catalyst for the 49ers. They were able to extend drives. There wasn't a lot of chunk plays. There wasn't a lot of big explosive plays. What they were able to do is control the ball, control the clock, and extend drives. And then conversely look, third down efficiency, the 49ers were 8 of 19. If you go 50% most of the time, or close to 50%, you're going to win a lot of ball games. The Dolphins were 1 for 9 on third and fourth down efficiency, 0 for 7 on third down. Can't win ball games like that. So, only thing I'll take away from this is that against the number one defensive football with 3 turnovers, because they had the second strip at the end, you were able to put up 308 yards on 45 plays for 6.8 average. That's pretty dang impressive. Like if you look at that with 3 turnovers and limited amount of plays, take care of the ball more, extend drives more on third down, and I feel pretty good against anybody else you're going to see from here on out. So. Dolphins have a lot to look forward to, and I just think it was an interesting prospect because Baker Mayfield got released this morning, and now everybody's saying send Baker to San Francisco, which I think is obviously an upgrade from Brock Purdy. But how well does he know this? How fast can he learn the system? How fast can he get integrated? Or is the locker room gonna like the guy? Christian McCaffrey's probably banging his head against the wall. Like, I just got away from the guy. Like, now you're bringing it back. Like this. I think that it is a clear talent. It's a clear it's a clear upgrade from what you have currently. But is it worth it? Do you need that for that team? I'm not 100% certain that you need that. You just stopped, well, you didn't really stop them, but you just held one of the best offenses in the NFL to 17 points. You just scored 33 points on one of the, a mid-tier defense. Do you really need Baker Mayfield? Is it worth shaking up the chemistry of that team potentially to bring in a guy like Baker Mayfield? Because you do have the Super Bowl nucleus everywhere else.
Yeah, I would say probably no, but I mean, if you bring him in, you got to make it clear that he's the backup until stated otherwise. I do feel that way. I'm glad that my preseason evaluation of Brock Purdy has been relatively accurate through one game, because I thought he looked good. I thought he put the ball in the right places in the preseason, and it's preseason, but man, this is a 7th round rookie. You know what I mean? Like, this is literally Mr. Irrelevant. So I thought that was a good sign, and his ability to do this in this game was pretty good. I don't think there's a wild difference in what he can do versus what Jimmy Garoppolo could do. I'm not going to lie. I don't think it's that different. I think, yes, Jimmy Garoppolo's proven more, but, where exactly did we see a huge drop-off specifically? Can you point to any one thing? I mean, I think Garoppolo has a better arm, but with all the guys in the style that Garoppolo played, how much of a difference does it really make? Like, honestly.
His ability, he's more poised. He takes care of the ball better. Jimmy doesn't turn the ball over a ton. Brock Purdy put the ball in harm's way a lot yesterday. There could have been at least 2 more interceptions that were dropped. They weren't able to stretch the ball vertically. They weren't able to stretch the ball vertically as they've been able to do with Jimmy G this year. He's actually been able to stretch the field, not all the time, but a lot more. They didn't even attempt to throw the ball down the field yesterday. Didn't really need to because they were extending drives, but there are some pretty clear differences between Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo. And as time plays off, we'll see this. I mean, this has happened all the time. Like, back a quarterback gets in, does well, but we're talking about a Super Bowl caliber team here. You feel much more certain. You feel much more comfortable going into war with Jimmy Garoppolo than Brock Purdy.
I hear you, but I know there's a difference between the two players, but the way that the 49ers play offense, I'm not sure that for them there's a massive difference. And sure, obviously you prefer one over the other, but I just don't think it changes things as much. Yeah, is he playoff proven? No, absolutely not. But I feel like he has some games left. We can see what he can do before they get to that point. And then maybe he'll be a nice little surprise. You know, I think even with Purdy, they can probably go toe-to-toe with most of the other teams in the NFC, aside from the Eagles. I'm not saying they win, but I don't think it's a blowout. And here's the other thing that I'll say that nobody has really wanted to up till this point. The Dolphins' defense, this is a game where you needed them to step up more because I know you weren't super critical of them, Kyron, but you're going up against a 7th-round rookie quarterback, and you are not a talentless defense. I mean, you got Xavier Howard, you've got Javon Holland, you've got Eric Rowe, you've got Christian Wilkins, you got Bradley Chubb, you got Jalen Phillips. You know what I mean? You got Melvin Ingram. I mean, this is a defense that should have more effect against a team like this. And I know they have a lot of playmakers. I know they do. But I would have hoped for a more imposing defensive performance against a player that steps in this situation. You know what I mean? I think
it's a philosophy thing with them, though. Like,
I agree.
It's more Boyer than the personnel. Like, you can't. What? It's just tough. Why are you manning up? You playing a single high safety against the 49ers when their biggest strength on offense is one-on-one matchups, getting the ball out quick to guys in space and letting them make plays happen. Put another safety back there. You have your guy. I know they're short a couple corners, but you have a safety in Verone McKinley that can spy in the back. They've proven it. When you put them in their second half against the Detroit Lions, which is one of the most explosive offenses in football, they didn't score a point, shut them down, took them out completely. Last week, again, against the Texans aren't very good, but when you were playing two high safeties, you've been able to keep everything in front of you, not to give up a lot of points. You have to count on them to stop the run up front. You have Christian Wilkins and Zach Seiler playing some of the best football I've seen them ever play yesterday. You have to count on your linebackers to stop that run. I get they have a very, very stout offensive line and they can run the football, the 49ers, that is. But you can't sit there and play single high safeties against Brock Purdy and let them guys just run out one-on-one to get those matchups and then to continue to get those little conversions. Make them earn it. Make them beat you throwing the ball down the field. You have to trust Jerome Baker and those linebackers to stop the run and do what's best for your defense. The only reason I give them a little bit of bail is because I hate the philosophy right now. Like, I think we need a new defense coordinator, and I don't think Boyer's bad. I just don't think that the philosophy is right for the personnel. At full health, maybe cool. You have those corners still healthy. You have your number one guy still healthy. Cool. Get out there, man them up, and let them do what they need to do. Down push pressure to get after the quarterback. But I don't think you need to against Brock Purdy. Let Chubb and those guys get home and make him beat you throwing the football.
All right. So, Nick, I'm going to give you one more opportunity to comment on this game if you so choose, and otherwise we're going to move on to our final afternoon game.
No, actually, I think Kyron's summing up the defense for Miami pretty well. They do have talent. I think it's a coaching thing. I think defense in general in the NFL is very much a talent and coaching mesh unit at this point. They have opportunities with the players available. I think Verone McKinley was a guy I had a 4th-round grade on. I was surprised he went. I don't even know if I don't think he got drafted, actually.
He went undrafted.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. They've had a couple guys, him and Trill Williams now, who both went undrafted, or maybe injuries, because that was why Trill didn't get drafted, but who I had higher grades on. It's there, and I know they have Howard, and they want to man up because they have these like good corners, but you've got to sometimes you just gotta force teams to throw into more bodies, and they, I don't know if they're like kind of hedging based off what this defense used to be when it was more of a Patriots-based defensive staff. But it is a little strange. They kind of seem like they haven't really made up their mind in terms of like what they want to be. And it's all over the place because, the Houston game, even, it was back and forth with McKinley. He was on the field like half the time.
All right.
They gotta make a decision here, and I think they are very capable of righting the ship. But it's been 3 months.
Yep. It's easy when you got a 20-point lead, though. That's been the problem. You haven't had to, it hasn't had to be a cause of concern because you're winning. They're scoring points every drive. But this is the game, like we said. So, like you said, give them a chance to figure it out. I think they'll be okay, but got to get it fixed.
They've got to be complementary because you're not always going to have both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on the field at the same time. Like, it's just not going to happen. And hopefully they do for the playoffs just because it's so fun to watch, but you don't know. And if that's the case, then you're going to have to change what you do defensively. Hopefully it's in time. Hopefully they maintain, health on that side of the ball too, because that's obviously been an issue throughout the season as well. But let's hit the feature matchup of the week. The Kansas City Chiefs versus the Cincinnati Bengals. This was a fun game. I will say the stars came out to play for Cincinnati more so. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow all had excellent games. I think Patrick Mahomes did his thing, but he relied more on the role players than his co-star in Travis Kelce. Big fumble in a key moment that was absolutely brutal. As Cincinnati's trailing by 7 in the fourth, Joe Burrow does his thing. They kick a field goal, then the Kelce fumble, then the Chris Evans touchdown pass, and then Casey misses the field goal that would have tied it up at the end. This really was back and forth, and this is what I expected from Joe Burrow this season. That's why he was in my top 5 quarterback ranking ahead of Justin Herbert, because I thought that he could play like this. I thought that this would be his next progression because we've seen him flash efficiency and dominance like this before. It's nice to see that the entire offense is coming together as well. It's nice to see that the offensive line, after more than half a season, is adjusting to him, and he's adjusting to it. He's not trying to hold the ball for so long. So I was excited by what I saw from Cincinnati in this game. I think it's actually at this point more than likely that they will win the division since Lamar's out. Right now they're tied up. You never want to count the Ravens out because they are just a great overall organization. But with Cincinnati playing like this, the loss of their quarterback, it seems like Cincinnati is probably going to overtake them for the division. Only time will tell. But, a win over Kansas City was probably their biggest step in doing so. I think they have to play with the Ravens at least one more time as well. So that's going to give an opportunity. So we'll see what happens with Lamar. That's not really part of our conversation today. But, from a Kansas City standpoint, I thought that their offense played well overall as well. Their vision came to fruition, and they just fell a little bit short. I mean, if Kelce maintains possession of that ball, they probably score at least a field goal again, and that's it. So this came down to the wire between two good quarterbacks, two good teams that we might see in the playoffs one more time, and I would not be sad if that were the case.
Yeah, the funniest thing about this game is that I think that the penalties killed the Chiefs more than anything in this game. And you look at the box score, and they only have 4 penalties the entire game. But they came on a 3rd and 15 conversion where they have an illegal man downfield. Patrick Mahomes makes a crazy play, extends the play, throws the ball downfield. They get the ball in plus territory and have a chance to take a commanding lead. Get a 3rd and 15 illegal man downfield, has that call back, can't convert, has the punt. Another one was when Joe Burrow threw an interception and there was a questionable holding call that got that call overturned. So I'm looking at those plays and I'm like, God, like it felt when I was watching the game, it felt like the penalties absolutely destroyed them. And then I look at the box score, like, dang, it's only 4 penalties, but they're just at the worst time possible. I mean, those 2 plays definitely could have changed the complexity of the game. But other than that, if I'm looking at just the way I saw the game play, Joe Burrow played a very good game. I think the most important thing for Joe Burrow was not the plays that he made, but the plays that he didn't make. A lot of plays that he normally forces the ball and throws the balls into tighter windows because he trusts himself, he trusts his guys. He didn't have to make a ton of those throws yesterday. And I think the fact that he wasn't forcing those throws was the biggest thing I took away from for him for that game. Be efficient. I mean, he threw the ball 31 times, had 286 yards, 25 completions. I mean, if you can play like that every game, you're going to give yourself a chance to win no matter what happens. Like we said, it's still only a 3-point game, but I think he played exceptionally well, and you can't take anything away from him. But if I had to give the MVP to that offense, it would have been Samaje Perine yesterday. Every time they needed a big play, every time they needed a third down conversion to stay, or they need to stay ahead of the chain. I mean, he had 21 carries for 106 yards, and he also had 6 catches for 49 yards. He was everywhere yesterday, and it's feel like it's kind of been leaning towards this all season. If you've been watching the Bengals play, he's starting to slowly get more and more incorporated in the offense. And Mixon's injured, right? I believe he's injured, but you kind of see Samaje Perine take over a little bit here. I don't think that they've looked as balanced as they've looked all year since. I mean, besides yesterday, I think yesterday Samaje Perine just gets it done a little bit different. He's a little bit more physical. He's a little bit more emphatic in his finishes. He likes to run people over. He pushes people. He's pushing people down after the play. He's standing over them, like just imposing his will a little bit more. Like you feel that as a defense, and you can see that as an offense. You kind of feed into that. So I think Samaje Perine played a hell of a game yesterday. Obviously, getting Jamar Chase back helps a little bit, but like you said, the Chiefs played very well too. I don't want to take anything away from the Chiefs. Travis Kelce fumble was so uncharacteristic. Like you don't see him do that, especially in that situation in the game in the fourth quarter. They're driving with a chance to kind of really put the game away there. You put the game away there, the game's over. You score a touchdown to go up 31-20. They're not more than likely. I don't know what the statistics in the analytics are, but there was only 6-7 minutes left. You're more than likely not going to score 11 points and come back and tie the game, let alone win. So, like you said, it's just a play here, play there, and this is turning out to be one of the best rivalries in football right now.
Yeah, this was really a great one to watch, and I like that we're seeing a team that's kind of giving Kansas City problems at the top here because it helps. I think it doesn't help us at all, but it helps everyone else as a fan kind of like in perspective, just not really know who the best team in the NFL is consistently week to week because there's this team that just matches up well with Kansas City. I think what we learned from this more than anything is that although the Chiefs have consistently been this like at their average best team in the NFL, there are teams now, I think with Tyreek Hill leaving Kansas City, that at their best with good quarterback play and with the explosive playmakers around those quarterbacks they have can max out above Kansas City. I think Cincy's included in this. I think Buffalo early season, we saw that they would be one of those teams and they've kind of dropped off. Miami might be in that mix. Philly's in the mix. Dallas might be in the mix. We saw what they did last night. But Cincy is certainly there, and I think the ability for them to get the run game going, I think Jamar Chase played a big part in this game, just made plays when it matters. He didn't have like the most, awesome stat line, but it was just, he made some impressive plays that, were Jamar Chase worthy, like in important spots that not only he makes and him and Joe Burrow have that chemistry that helps with that. There's a development here with Joe Burrow that I think is quite interesting that we saw around week 6 against the Falcons. They couldn't really space out the defense well. They were struggling throwing it downfield. The run game sucked. So they started throwing in the RPOs and they ran RPOs at LSU. And so he's used to them, right? But the thing about RPOs in college is like, first of all, there's a lot of teams that just will run 40 RPOs in a game and never throw it like in the MAC because I don't know what they're doing. They're just hoping that teams will drift over to it. But at LSU, where you're actually going to throw them eventually, a lot of it is like we're watching numbers and throw it when there's yak, like throw it when there's space for guys to run into. In the NFL, you're not going to throw RPOs that often, especially when it's like an out route one-on-one to space where guys can get yardage. You're just trying to fit a throw that a guy can catch and get 6 yards and get tackled immediately because you're trying to replace the run game effectively. You're just trying to get those quick yards. With Jamar Chase in the game, he looked a little more uncomfortable throwing these balls because he wasn't used necessarily just throwing that ball up in a close, I don't want to say always contested jump balls because it's like these out routes generally are throws you want to make more when you have space to throw the ball. And with T. Higgins being your lead receiver for a couple weeks now, you've gotten used to making those throws with less space because that's what the type of receiver T. Higgins is. He is a guy who can separate, but more often than not, you're throwing this ball to the guy when he has, just a little bit of space to make the catch. And now Burrow looks more comfortable throwing these RPOs when he knows his receiver is going to catch it and get tackled immediately just to get those quick 5 or 6 yards. And I think it's really helped this offense get the run game going. And you're seeing this now with Perine. I think when Mixon is healthy, we might even see even more of a boost. It's a shocking development for a team who I think I've very much gone after their coach and offensive coordinator, Zach Taylor. Although I might give Joe Burrow a little more credit for it here. And they're in the mix for the 1 seed at this point because they got a good game against Buffalo later this year at home. They got a home game against the Ravens still. They're as much alive in this race for contention as any team in the NFL.
Yeah, I love that we've been talking about P. Ryan because he stylistically is very different than Mixon. I mean, Mixon is a more explosive back. P. Ryan has an attitude with the way he runs. Kyron, you're right. But he also brings an efficiency to the passing game, and he's better in pass protection. So if what the Bengals want to do is throw the ball, he does more for that than the threat of Joe Mixon as a runner. His ability to pass protect and catch the ball and sustain drives, like that's actually probably more beneficial to the overall offense than a heavier dose of Joe Mixon. Mixon, he will have a big game, obviously. I think he had like 5 touchdowns or something at one point earlier this year, but that's not sustainable. I feel like he has more negative runs trying to create explosive plays. I feel like he's fumbled the ball more. I don't have stats to back this up, so I should probably not just throw it out there. But just from the eye test, I feel like P. Ryan has evolved into just this more consistent, reliable player within that offense. And when when you have Joe Burrow and you have Jamar Chase and you have T. Higgins, you don't necessarily need another star potential guy. You need the guy that allows those other guys to do their work. And I will say, like, Travis Kelce, obviously, much like Justin Jefferson, no matter what his stat line is, he will always impact the game. But from a production standpoint, he was actually like the 4th most impactful guy for the Chiefs offense, which is a good sign for me. I mean, he can go off in any given week, but Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon both had solid days running the ball. I think they both had over 50 yards. Then Pacheco and McKinnon both had a little bit in the passing game, but then Marquez Valdes-Scantling, he had 71 yards receiving, and then Travis Kelce comes in behind that. So I like what they have there, and I will always trust them. Like I said, I picked the Chiefs to cover this game, but I wasn't going to feel bad about that because even if in this 1 week it didn't come to fruition, I'll always feel good about making that pick, and I will for the rest of the season and the playoffs as well. But I think when you look at the AFC playoff picture, I feel really good about the Bills, and I know that they've been a little inconsistent, but I still feel very good about what they have and the completeness of their team. We'll see what their defense looks like once they get to the playoffs. We'll see if Von Miller's back. We'll see if Tre'Davious White is there looking good. Some of that will have to do with it. I feel good about the Bengals. I feel good about the Chiefs. And I feel really good about the Miami Dolphins offense and really good about the Jets defense. I think every other team right now, I have some major questions about. I think, those 3 I mentioned are the most complete, and then there's 2 tremendously good units. And I think the Titans at this point, I'm not sure that they can hang their hat on either side after the way that they played this past week. And the Ravens, I mean, they're exclusively relying on Lamar Jackson to be a really competitive team. Yes, they did beat the Broncos with Tyler Huntley, but, Broncos have obviously had a very poor season up to this point. So that's all that I have on this one. You guys have anything else before we move on to Sunday Night Football?
Nothing from me.
All righty. So the Dallas Cowboys and the Indianapolis Colts in what probably was never going to be a fair matchup. So yesterday on the Pick'em show, my prediction for this game was this will probably be competitive with the Colts relatively effective running the ball for about half of the game to about partway through the third quarter, and then the Cowboys will run away with it. And I nailed the game script to a T, like almost to the minute. Basically, by the end of the third quarter, the Cowboys just started creating explosive plays on offense and defense. The Colts just couldn't pass protect as the gap started to widen. And I just don't think that there really should have been any expectation otherwise, personally. I mean, one team just clearly outclasses the other. And no matter if you have Jonathan Taylor or not, eventually, the bill will come due, and CeeDee Lamb is going to make a play, and Micah Parsons is going to make a play, and Tony Pollard's going to have an explosive play. And if you if you can't get it done on offense, the gap will just widen. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think it was super weird watching this game because the Colts played a really good football game for 3 quarters. Went to the fourth quarter 21-29, and they missed the 2-point conversion with a chance to tie the game up. And if you look at the box scores, it's not that big of a discrepancy. I mean, the Cowboys had about 70 more yards of offense, and a lot of that was on the last 2 drives. But it was just weird. I've never seen a game flip that fast. A game that's pretty competitive. Dak Prescott didn't play a great game to me. He had a pretty bad interception. And even the beginning of that drive where he threw the interception, he threw another one right in Stephon Gilmore's face and he dropped it. And then he came back and caught it 3 plays later. But he threw another ball that was originally ruled an interception, but they overturned it. He put the ball in harm's way a lot, which was weird to me. I'm not a huge Dak fan, but I think he had like an uncharacteristically weird game. Or maybe it's not weird. Maybe it's just Dak. I mean, he puts the ball in harm's way a lot, throws a couple bad balls, but he made a couple really good throws as well into tight windows. I think the biggest thing I took away from this was the balance that Zeke and Tony Pollard. That's the only thing I've ever talked about with the Cowboys. How balanced they are when Zeke and Tony Pollard are both getting equal touches. You're pounding the defense and wearing them down. You're getting Tony Pollard the ball on the edges and letting him do his thing. They really took over that game. They ran for 220 yards. I think they combined for 3 or 4 rushing touchdowns, I believe it was. 2 for Tony Pollard, 1 for Zeke, and 1 for the kid that came in the game, White, I believe is his name. Mike Davis, sorry. But Malik Davis, excuse me. But I think it was a weird game. Like, I don't want to say that it was anything coaching-wise either. Matt Ryan just made some, inexplicably, silly decisions. Somebody said it like he was point shading last night. I was like, it's just so weird. Like, it's a 2-point ball game. You have the ball with a chance to go take the lead, potentially win the football game, and then you just get 2 just unexplainable interceptions. Just weird decisions. So the Cowboys pass rush is legit. Their balance is heck on offense. I don't have too much to take away from this game. Other than that was just the weirdest fourth quarter I've ever seen. 21-19 going into the fourth quarter, and then you get outscored 33-0 in the fourth quarter. Just totally inexplicable. 2 defensive touchdowns. Another turnover on downs. You go for it on 4th and 1 and backed up on your own. I think it was the 15 or 16. In my opinion, you punt the ball there. You're not going to come back and win the game at that point. You're down 30 points with 6 minutes left. Why are you going for it? Maybe that's something like the Jeff Saturday stuff. But, I mean, I've seen stuff like that from other coaches as well. So I won't put that just on Jeff Saturday. But we're finished with this one. Cowboys are the Cowboys. I still think the problems for the Cowboys are going to rear their head when it matters. But strange game. But Jonathan Taylor looked pretty good, and I think that's encouraging for the Colts. Start to see him get back into form. And the offensive line held up pretty decent, to be honest. I mean, they only gave up 3 sacks. A lot of those were at the end of the game where everybody's just pissed off and giving up. So a little bit of stuff to be encouraged about if you're the Colts, but strange ending.
Yeah, at that point in the game, going for a 4th and 1 down 30, it's like, you're going to lose anyways. So I don't know. It doesn't really affect the outcome of the game, but man, this Cowboys front 7 has the ability to make any quarterback just turn into Nathan Peterman in his rookie season. It's kind of crazy. I have to put this front 7 up there in tier 1 with all the other teams in the NFL that have strengths there. And it's pretty terrifying if you're a team who's not certain at the quarterback position, because they're going to feast on you, quite frankly. And that's, I think, where I get a little concerned about Dallas is they win games like this. I think the past couple of years they've had a win like this, Sunday Night Football at home. And it was to Washington last year, and they did it really in the first game too. Washington made it look closer than it was later, where they aren't great with Taylor Heineke. Their offensive line is beat up, and same thing with the Colts here. And you got guys running free. You got an extra blitzer often because Micah Parsons is sometimes lining up at middle linebacker, and so he's coming through unblocked sometimes depending on the way you align. And it can turn games that look close into this, quite frankly. And I think to an extent, this is an organization that will, Dallas will like to run up the score a little bit on you on Sunday Night Football at home because it's that's
good
maybe
for business.
It's good for business, and it's it's kind of they got some flair. They've always had some flair to them. I hate to admit it, but they probably get to do this a little more than other teams do. But it's the dominant part of their team right now. They have this over the top element. A couple years ago when they were that 8-18, that was all about offense. That's the team we've kind of come to expect. And yes, they have an explosive offense, But when this team is at their best, it's when they get 2 turnovers or more, 3 or 4 out of that front seven. And this is what can happen. And they are capable of doing this against any team in the NFL. It's going to be interesting to see them against the Eagles with Dak now and see if they can possibly force Jalen Hurts into a game. I think that's going to be the ultimate test for Jalen Hurts, is how he looks against this front seven at full strength when Dallas also has an offense to support it. The question is, if they get past the Eagles, then, are they capable of flustering a Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, or Pat Mahomes? Not certain they are. We haven't really seen that from them yet. They kind of had an opportunity to do that to the Chiefs last year, and although the Chiefs did score 19 points, they had control of that game the entire way almost. So it's interesting. Like, this is another team where it's like, on their average, like their talent level, like they're good. I don't know what their high end is. And yes, they blew out the Colts. And I think the overreaction from the media is going to be, this is one of the best teams in the NFL because they blew out the Colts. But look, guys, I'm starting to think Jeff Saturday might not be Indy's coach next year. They just, like, this isn't a team that should be playing in this spot, quite frankly, on Sunday Night Football. And I think Dallas kind of showed us why.
Yeah, we've gotten Colts in back-to-back primetime games, and we have them again in like a couple of weeks too. So, it's tough. That's it. It kind of puts the Colts on blast a little bit. But the reason I wasn't surprised about this game, and that about the way that it turned out, and why I predicted the game script to be exactly what it was, is because the Colts can run the ball relatively well, even without Braden Smith in. So basically, you've got Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly in the middle, who force you to, and of course Jonathan Taylor, who force you to be at least cognizant of that, right? So if you're the Cowboys, you're not teeing off on rushing the quarterback just yet. You know what I mean? You're more focused on stopping Jonathan Taylor because he is the one who can create an explosive play, and so you're paying attention to that more so. As soon as the Cowboys built up a lead and started to force the Colts to feel like they had to throw the ball to catch up, even though the gap wasn't that wide, that's when they were able to start teeing off, didn't have to worry about the run game really at all. And that's why the game got so lopsided so quickly. And that's basically what I thought would happen, because I knew the Colts can run the ball, at least to some degree. At some point, they will get behind because their offense just isn't as good. And at that point, the pass rush of the Cowboys will do their thing. And I think, they'll go up against better teams that are they have more duality on their offense. So, I don't know if it will be as easy to predict, but right now, the Cowboys have a recipe for success in the playoffs. They've got some explosive players. They've got a good offensive line, and they have a tremendous pass rush. And we've seen that work in the playoffs before. So are they one of the best teams in the NFL? I don't know. But they do have the pieces that, that suggests postseason success. So I think that's all I will say about them right now. Anything else, guys? Because we can jump into a quick Monday night preview between two underwhelming teams in the NFC South, if that sounds fun.
Hey, this is a division race we got to talk about. It's a big deal.
Yeah. All right. The New Orleans Saints will be visiting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay are home favorites by only 3 points on Monday Night Football. This suggests that the Saints are basically on par with the Buccaneers, and the 3 points come from a home field advantage, which to me is kind of ridiculous because I think the Saints are notably worse than the Buccaneers right now. So whatever, Vegas has their formula for deciding what the spread is, but I just have a hard time seeing how a banged up defense and an offense that at this point is basically featuring Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave is going to beat Tom Brady. I know the Bucs offense has been underwhelming, even if Brady has played okay, but I still feel like they are clearly the better team here. I mean, we have our injury report rolling on the bottom, courtesy of Noah, and I haven't really looked at it yet, but actually that's pretty bad for the almost entire secondary is out. But still, the they overall have more talent. They're less banged up, and I'm always going to trust Tom Brady over Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton gets, in my opinion, more credit than he's due, not necessarily based on his early career, but what he's done since he's been a Bengal. It's not been very good. He just has moments here or there. So to me, it's a pretty easy call. I mean, questionable Marshawn Lattimore, Pete Warner, Kevin White, who actually has made plays for them because they've been so banged up. I mean, I don't know. This seems like it's going to be a very ugly Monday Night Football game. Kyron, I mean, I know you're a bigger Bucs fan than a Saints fan. You definitely were pro Saints earlier this year, but if you can talk me out of this, I mean, kudos to you.
Well, I just think this game's going to come down to taking care of the football. And who do I trust to take care of the football more? I trust Tom Brady and that offense to take care of the football more. I mean, it's hilarious, like all the talks about Brady and the offense, and Brady sitting here with 3,000 yards, 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Like, he's sitting at sixth in the NFL in passing yards right now. And with a 300-yard game, he could be sitting at second or first. Like, the offense has found a way to move the ball all year. What they need to do is finish drives. I need to see an improvement in red zone offense for them. And I think that's just going to help out the defense. The defense hasn't played bad all year. I feel like the defense is getting a bad rap. Statistically, they're like top 5 in almost every category. They're playing pretty dang good football. The offense has to score more points, and you have to play complementary football. I do think an emphasis in the run game will help the Buccaneers if they can get that established. Just because you need to extend drives more, you need to keep other offenses off the field. If you're not going to score a lot of points, the least you can do is control the clock and have a huge time possession gap. So if they can do that, at least, I think that they can force enough turnovers with Andy Dalton. I mean, Andy Dalton's giving you 7 interceptions. He's also fumbled a couple times, lost a couple fumbles. He'll put the ball in harm's way a lot more. I also think that the DB mismatch for the Buccaneers is going to be on display tonight. I don't think they're going to be able to contain Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Julio. Even Julio's been making a lot of plays lately. He hasn't had like a 10-catch game, a 100-yard game, but he's had 3 catches for 55 yards type games where he's made chunk plays and had an impact on the game. If he can continue to do that, if you can still get the possession touches to Chris Godwin, and then you can stretch the field with Mike Evans to get those deep passes, I think they'll be fine. The Buccaneers are sitting pretty. Even if they lose this game, they'll still be leading the division. It's just hilarious to how bad this division is. So it's like the Falcons lost. Still to beat the Falcons gave them a little bit of cushion here. If they can win this game, go to 6-6, go to 4-3 at home. They can essentially wrap the division up here tonight if they win this football game. So I think you'll see a really good version of Brady. I think you'll see a really good version of the offense, and I think they'll win pretty convincingly here. I think I'll give a prediction. I'll say like 28-17 type of victory, and that's with the Saints scoring late there to kind of give them a little bit of hope. I think it'll be a convincing win.
I think the one thing that will give Vegas pause is just that this New Orleans defense has been the kryptonite to Tom Brady, right? Pete Werner and Marshawn Lattimore are questionable right now. It's going to matter a lot whether those guys play or not for my prediction. Like, I honestly think this game could very well hinge on that because it's going to be either them against the beat-up defense and the Saints are unable to stop Brady and they kind of grind a win out that's, again, looks kind of convincing, maybe 10 points, but maybe isn't like this wildly explosive victory. Or it could be a struggle because I do think that structurally and the way this defense plays in New Orleans, it continues to give the Bucs offense, especially the way they've played this year, problems. This could be an ugly, low-scoring game if they can get contributions from guys they're not even necessarily expecting to play. Dalton, yes, has not been great this year. He's had some really good games, even against good defenses. He's had some really bad games against bad defenses. So it's hard to expect anything really out of him. Like, I don't know what we're going to get. I'd expect like a run-heavy game plan for New Orleans, and I think they probably hope that they can control the clock, play defense, and keep this low scoring. This is a very important game for Tampa. I think if they win this game, you can take them seriously as a team that like has potential to win a playoff game, maybe make some noise in playoffs just because they have Tom Brady and talent, even if their record isn't great. But if they lose again to this team, we're looking at an ugly division that who knows the winner is. And even if Tampa ends up being favored in a home playoff game because they have Tom Brady, I think at that point it's a little concerning that they should be favored at all, just because we've been talking about this for months. Like, I want to see the Buccaneers at full strength play their best football, and it just doesn't seem like they've been able to figure it out. Against Seattle, they had a really good game, but even then it was kind of something out of left field with, riding Rashad White, and again, which they haven't really done since then. Maybe that's something that they need to get back to a little bit more and see what happens with that. But look, Brady hasn't played badly at all. I think he's been great, but it hasn't been enough for them. And I think, my biggest blame point at this point for them probably is offensive creativity. Like, they just kind of been doing the same stuff and it hasn't been working. But defensively, they have the pieces. They've even gotten better, I think, as the defense has gone on. And Vita Vea, I think, had a rough start to the year and has gotten going and really has played well this past couple months. They have to win this game. And I think this is a 3-point spread because of the way New Orleans defense has played against them in the past.
I think, with Akeem Hicks and Vita Vea both being questionable, maybe that creates a little bit of nervousness. But if they both play, I'm fairly confident. Look, if the Saints do win this game, they have a real opportunity to win the division, because at that point, they're only a half game back because they have an 8th loss versus the Buccaneers, who would only have the 7 losses. But, I mean, who do we trust more in the playoffs? A team that struggled throughout the regular season but has Tom Brady going into the postseason, or the New Orleans Saints with Andy Dalton? I mean, like, I don't know if it necessarily matters that much at this point, but just for an observer of football, I would much rather see the Buccaneers make the playoffs, honestly, just for whatever that ends up bringing, even if they're not quite a complete enough team to end up winning a game. I feel like there's just a real threat there. I don't know. I mean, like I said, Vita Vea and Akeem Hicks, they matter in this matchup. The secondary's banged up. Mike Edwards, Sean Murphy-Bunting, and Antoine Winfield are all out. But that, they still have Carlton Davis, and they still have their linebacking core in place. They still have their I don't even know who plays edge for them anymore. Isn't Shaq Barrett? Is he only temporarily hurt? Is he back in now, or is he out for the season?
He had an Achilles, I believe, so I think he's out.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know. They're both banged up, but I think the Saints' injuries hurt worse just because they don't have that steadying force at the most important position. So I don't know. I'll be perfectly honest. As much as I love football, I'm finding it slightly challenging to get excited about that game. So let's pick it, move on, and then we can talk about the college football playoff, because that's relevant right now more so than the NFC South on prime time, to be honest. All right. I'm going to take the Saints, the Bucks at -3 to cover. Kyron, you already kind of gave your score, but to make it official.
Yeah, 28-17 Bucks. I think he had a 2-touchdown game, maybe 3-touchdown game from Brady. I just think it's time for them to make that leap. And you've seen this before. The year that they went to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl, I believe they were sitting at 6-6 or 6-5 during that year, and they struggled pretty heavily early. I know that they were 4-4 to start the season, and then you start to see them kind of flip the switch. I think you've seen that over the last couple of weeks. They just struggled to end that game against the Browns, but overall they played much better football the last 2 to 3 weeks. I think you'll see that again today, and they'll get a nice victory tonight.
I still think they'll get it going a little bit here. I just don't think tonight's going to be like the breakout night. I think they win like 16-10. I think it'll be another ugly one. And the difference between this team and that team is I don't think they have the depth of weapons. I know Julio's played better, but look, this guy is not what he was, and they haven't played the quality of opponents. The NFC South is bad, and they haven't put these games away easily. They lost to the Panthers pretty badly, and I know that was a while ago, but we haven't really seen them blow out a team, and I don't. I think New Orleans is going to play a game that makes it difficult for them to really rout them. So I think close, low scoring, and Tampa will be happy to get out of here with a win because it'll basically put them in the driver's seat of the division. They can focus kind of on fine tuning what they're going to be going forwards.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't think this game is going to be a high-scoring affair unless something gets out of control on defense, if they get a defensive touchdown or something like that, which wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, certainly. All right, Briefly, before we jump into college football, let's just take a quick look at the playoff picture as it stands. If the season ended today, we had a little bit of a shakeup. The Bills are now the number 1 seed, so they would be getting a bye. The Chiefs are still comfortably ahead in the AFC West. I don't think anything is changing that at this point. The Ravens did squeak out a 1-point win against the Denver Broncos, but they lost Lamar Jackson, so we need to monitor that situation closely. He's out days to weeks, which, I mean, to me, that's coach speak for like we're going to not see him for a little while. I don't think we're literally going to see him only out for days. That gives the Bengals a great opportunity to overtake them because they are now the number 5 seed, so the top ranking wild card team. The Titans are well coached. I think they just lack talent. So I need to look at exactly who their remaining schedule is. They may be able to knock some teams off if they're playing a heavy dose of AFC South, but I don't expect them to overtake for anything higher than the 4th seed at this point, which means that as of right now, the Jets would have to go into Arrowhead and play their first playoff game. So even if they do end their playoff drought, they're probably not going to go far in the playoffs, at least with that matchup. I do love the defense, but that's a pretty tough out. The Dolphins currently would have to go in and play the Ravens, but that would probably switch to the Bengals if they move forward. And I think that's a tough matchup for the Dolphins, who have a questionable defense. We need to see how these teams close out the season. And then right now, the Bengals and Titans would play. But if things do switch, the Ravens and Titans would play. The Ravens and Titans would play. So that's, whatever the case, that is a pretty fun postseason rivalry. Patriots, Chargers, and Raiders are now the closest teams on the outside looking in. Pretty much every single one of those teams has at least one, if not multiple, major issues with the roster at this point. On the NFC side, the Eagles continue their dominant run with a really nice win over the Titans. They are still only 1 game ahead, but they do have the tiebreaker as well, so they've got a little padding there. Vikings are still the 2nd seed, will likely continue to be, just because the other best team is probably in the same division as the Eagles. The 49ers, we've talked about them already. For them, it's really how efficient can Brock Purdy be, because they've got guys pretty much everywhere else to help them maintain what they've already done. The Seahawks are waiting in the wings. They're only a game behind right now at 7-5, which makes them the 7th seed. So we could see them swing back up. They had a nice win over the Rams, but they still need to prove it over the final 6 games. They are not a flawless team either. And Buccaneers, we just talked about them coming up tonight. Cowboys, again, I think they are comfortably the 3rd best team right now, just because they have the quarterback situation in place. And then the Giants, I mean, they managed to maintain the 6th seed because they tied with the Washington Commanders. But again, they've been, I don't want to say exposed, but their limitations are visible for sure. Commanders, Lions, and Packers. I think the Lions and Packers, they're, not out of the realm of possibility, but it would be a real uphill battle for them. As great as the Lions offense has looked, they still have to gain multiple games on at least one of those teams. They're 2.5 games back on the Giants because they have a tie that gives them that half-game point. They're 2 games back on the Seahawks, and I'm pretty sure the Seahawks beat them in a head-to-head matchup earlier this year.
Yeah.
So that's another half game for them. So I think realistically, if we're looking at this, the Lions are the only team outside of the Commanders that have a chance, but it's a small one at that. As far as the matchups go, Seahawks, Vikings, that's probably a good game. Giants, 49ers, again, like I said, when they get to the playoffs, if that's their matchup, the 49ers can win that game, even with Brock Purdy. And then the Cowboys, the Buccaneers, that's a rematch of a pretty fun game. So we'll see. I think the playoffs are shaping up to be pretty good. Maybe there are some teams we don't necessarily believe in as much, but not bad. So before I jump into the draft order real quick, do you guys have any key takeaways about this playoff seeding?
Man, I really hope we don't get Brock Purdy versus Daniel Jones in the playoffs. Man, like, how did we get to this point, man? What are we doing?
No, as a Dolphins fan, I love that first round matchup. If we sat exactly where we are right now and got a chance to play the Ravens first round, maybe without Lamar Jackson playing quarterback, that'd be pretty ideal, to be honest.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, I'm not sure how realistic that is. I think there's a very good opportunity for the Bengals to overtake for that third seed. Are you feeling as good about going in again and playing in Cincinnati against Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins?
Well, I think
their defense. Yeah, that defense doesn't scare me at all.
They'd probably go up to play Tennessee if the Bengals hop the Ravens.
Bengals defense don't scare me either, though. Joe Burrow in the offense, they definitely give a lot of fits, but
maybe
even the first game before Tua went out, there was a lot of deep shots and there was a lot of real estate being eaten up by Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I like that matchup, to be honest, but I hope we get to see it. I want to see him play. I want to see Tua go against all the guys in the playoffs. I want to see all the tough matchups just so we can see where everybody is and how good everybody actually is. I think it's high in time for it, and I think it'll be the best TV, the best football possible. Like, that's the most exciting matchups. The Burrow Tua storylines. Maybe if the Dolphins can win a first round, and you get the Chiefs against the Dolphins. Who doesn't want to see those two teams play against each other with those storylines? Like, those would be the most exciting matchups. So hopefully in the playoffs, we get that.
Yeah, it's true. And Nick, you said you don't want to see Brock Purdy versus Daniel Jones, but at least one of them has to win. And if it's Brock Purdy, then you might be seeing the 49ers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You know what I mean? As a
Thank goodness we're saved.
Let's be honest. Would it be unrealistic for the 49ers to beat Daniel Jones and then beat the Buccaneers? That, who knows how healthy they are at that point? I mean, let's be fully honest. Would it be unrealistic to see Brock Purdy-led 49ers in an NFC Championship game?
Mike White can win the NFC, man. I'm not.
The Jets actually
they can get there. I think
probably
the Niners
could, but
the Niners are like 8-point underdogs in Philadelphia right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's true, but I'm just saying, like, that's kind of why I don't think the 49ers' hopes are as dead as people are with this snap reaction, because depending on how the seeding plays out, there may be some very winnable games. So I'll leave it at that. Let's talk about the draft order quickly. This is the top 18 picks, again, not including playoff teams, just because that gets pretty wild. But at this point, we have the Texans and the Bears with the top two seeds. Only one of those teams needs a quarterback. I think I've said before, I think with the New England ties with Nick Caserio that we are probably going to see them take Bryce Young. I don't know that, obviously, for sure. Nobody knows that, but it makes sense, at least right now. Leaves either the Bears in a position where they can take one of the top defenders or trade back for a team that wants to go up and get their CJ Stroud or their Will Levis or whoever they like. And then the Seahawks at number 3. I mean, if I'm a Seahawks fan, I don't even care about the playoffs this year right now, because I'm just looking at that number 3 overall pick and the team that I have in place and what next year looks like for them. This would be a really fun matchup. I love that. Let's see, teams that have fallen out of the top 10. Packers are no longer in the top 10. Wouldn't be surprised if things stay that way. Same with the Browns. We're not going to get into the Deshaun Watson conversation today. I'm going to give it another week, but that's something to monitor as well. Steelers, I wouldn't be. Who would be surprised here if the Steelers finish over 500 at this point?
Not me. With that defense healthy, yeah, pretty good.
Tomlin is the truth.
He is, man. It's always funny to me how ready people are to just move on from these guys with incredible resumes. And Mike Tomlin is absolutely one of those guys. So we'll see if Kenny Pickett can continue to develop. He's already looked better now than he has earlier in the season. That's a great sign for them. They'll probably be right out in the playoff mix next year. I think it's a little too late at this point. But, teams that are just are just very disappointing. I mean, with a loss tonight from the Saints, the Eagles might pop back into the top 5, I guess. So they might also get another top 5 pick from a team that was a little overeager to trade away a pick. But, any key takeaways from this? I know, Nick, you're probably looking forward to this more than anybody right now. But anything jump out at you? Any key picks that you think would just be perfect pairings with some of the top prospects?
Bears continue to do this thing where they get the most out of Justin Fields but still lose, and it's helping them. So, congrats to them on that. They're going to be a key trade back team. I mean, they obviously could take a top prospect at that spot if they want to, although if they, if they win one more game, that might not be the case. I've been on record saying that I think kind of those top 4 picks are like the separation between the top prospects and everyone else. So hopefully they keep losing for their sake, but you're the Eagles, you're rooting for the Bucs big time tonight, because if you can hop back into that top 4 potentially, then you're looking maybe at a Carter or a Will Anderson, hoping one of those QBs maybe is available for a trade down option. Other than that, I mean, it's a little. I'm still really trying to figure out this draft. There's not a lot of guys that I really, really love. I think there's like a separation of like, those top 4, and there's like another 4 or 5 guys, and I'm like, those guys are definitely first round picks. And it's kind of open still because we've had a lack of breakout players, in my opinion, in college. The Falcons continue to slip because they keep losing. That's another one that I think is interesting. They could end up getting a higher pick than we expect.
Yeah, it's possible too. It will be wild if we have 3 of the top 5 picks all being selected by teams that didn't originally own that pick. I think we might see a turn away from teams being so eager to trade future picks away, because I mean, it's worked out to some degree, but this is like a pretty hard turn in the other direction, where the Broncos, Rams, and Saints all notably overestimated how good they were going to be in this year. But yeah, Kyron, I'll throw it to you if you want to say anything, but I know that we're kind of getting up on time here, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say about draft board yet.
Okay. All right, then let's hit the college football update. We just finished conference championship weekend, and we now have the official playoff seeding. So Georgia is going to be matched up against Ohio State, and Michigan is going to be matched up against TCU. What happened? We just lost that.
You got it, though. Yeah, that was the top 4.
And so Michigan is going to be up against TCU. I know, Kyron, you're not super happy about this. I know you definitely believe that Alabama should have been in that Final Four mix, considering the loss to TCU in particular. But, I mean, like, this is where I'll bow out of the conversation. You guys say what you want to say, and then I will come back in to close out the show.
I'm not really upset about it. I think this is what was logical the whole time. I just think it was fun being able to, like, make the case, because it should be considered a little bit heavier. Like, I think the strength of record thing, maybe you, because you're more like in that field than I am, Nick, when did that become a viable statistic? Because I think it's like the most silly thing I've ever heard in my life.
I actually don't know how it works, and it is, I don't know if it's new this year or something that came up last year. I need to look into exactly how it works. It has to do, it probably has to do with just the teams like the record of teams you're beating, and this like the value of your like strength of victory versus strength of loss. Right. It could also just be, I don't know if it's an ESPN stat. They could be using FPI, which would be a whole other thing. Which it's really tough with some of this stuff, just because not everyone plays everyone. It's tough to compare.
And it's like I know everybody hates the SEC, and I would have so much more respect and like just understanding if people were just like, we're tired of seeing the same people in. But this whole idea that TCU is more deserving is like pretty silly to me. It's like, if we actually do people watch these games and watch these teams play? And it's like, TCU's best win going into that matchup was against Kansas State. Kansas State lost to Texas, a team that Alabama beat. They lost to Tulane, who won the AAC championship. They lost to 2 teams that aren't considered to be very good. And that was TCU's best win. And every other game, they're squeaking by, against average, solid teams. I think TCU is a good team. They deserve a lot of credit. They're very solid, well coached. They have a couple of dudes that are like legit NFL prospects that should be taken seriously. But I think Nick Saban, he was funny. Like, that press run that he went on this weekend was like extremely shameless. Like, it was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, but he said something that's pretty cool to me, and he was just like, if we were to make odds for these teams that are in deliberation right now, you put us against Ohio State and TCU, who would be the favorite going into those games? Who would be the favorite going into exactly? Who would be the favorite? Even in a Tennessee rematch on a neutral field, it'd be Alabama, regardless if Hendon Hooker was healthy or not. I think just the SEC in general should hold a little bit more weight. South Carolina, 8-4, goes and beats the ACC champion Clemson. Florida beats the Pac-12 champion in Utah. Ole Miss beat the Sun Belt champion Troy that finished 11-2. Alabama beat a ranked Texas team. Georgia beat ranked Oregon. Kentucky beat ranked Louisville. Tennessee beat 8-4 Pitt. Arkansas beat Cincy and BYU. Cincy was ranked at the time. I think they're still at the back end now. When you look at the actual course of the season, that season should weigh more. A 10-2 season or an 11-1 season against that type of schedule should fare much more than a Big 12. And I don't think that the Big 12 is just terrible, but let's be honest about it. Is it about the 4 best teams, and I hate the word most deserving, because I think the most deserving team is the team that played the much tougher schedule and played the tougher road games and the tougher out of conference. So I don't really care too much, because it's like the 12-team playoff has pretty much ensured that those Alabamas, Ohio States, Georgias, Michigans will make the playoff every season now. And I think it completely waters down the product to a certain degree. But before I pass it back to you, Nick, I do think it's interesting that the BCS and the computers have had the exact same rankings the entire season. So what do we really need the committee for, and what do we really need the playoff for?
Well, okay, so I'll answer this in 2 parts because I think it's interesting. The deserving thing, I think, has always been a resume discussion, and I think it's just, unfortunately, I think you have to take the teams that are by losses, because if we were going to go with the best teams, like, for example, the year that Alabama loses to Auburn on the kick 6, was Auburn better than Alabama? Probably not. So it should have been Alabama versus Florida State in the national championship. Alabama might have won, Yeah. So, you kind of have to take the results of the games. We could do this the other, like TCU beat Texas also, and maybe that's their best one if Bama's best one's Texas. And I think, quite honestly, TCU had a more, safer game than Bama did. To come from behind to win. Now, Bama had some injuries going in that game, but we could do that comparison. We could say Tennessee lost to Bama and then got absolutely destroyed by South Carolina, who, I think, quite honestly, TCU is a favored team against South Carolina, if they play tomorrow. So, we can draw these comparisons, and it's tough. I do think Bama's a better team than TCU. I think they're a better team than Michigan. I think they're a better team than Ohio State. I think that they would have a shot against Georgia. But we've also seen that Bama's kind of had this, if you would like to say, like Buffalo Bills type thing, where, depending on how their quarterback plays, their highest level of play is good enough to compete with Georgia, and they also are capable of losing to South Carolina. So it's tough, and I think the expanded playoff is going to take this discussion away, and it is probably going to allow for those teams to go in every year. My thing always with the expanded playoff is it's been about recruiting. There was a year, and it's interesting because there was a year early on with the top 4 new playoff where you had 52 5-stars, 35 of them went to Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, just those 3 schools. And eventually we see these guys start transferring to other schools because they can't all play at the same school because there's just not enough spots. And so maybe that's leveled off. We've started seeing new teams make the playoff because of it. But what happened is when you expanded to 4 teams is it made the Rose Bowl not important. It made the Orange Bowl not important because everyone wants to go to school now. They have a better chance to make a championship. Why would you go to a school where you don't have a chance to make a championship? So when you make, more spots, it opens up opportunities for more teams to have a shot to go in, and it might even out recruitment at some point here. I don't know if that's certain. NIL, I think, has done maybe a better job of that because teams are maybe a little smarter about how they use their resources with recruiting, and it's made the game have more. There's more assets, there's more resources to work with, and it's equalized. I think at some level, although maybe that will change at some point once teams with more resources figure out how to use it. This is, it's all about trying to create parity in college football. It's been very difficult to do this from the get-go. I think you need to have, one over governing body to try and even things out in the first place. I've always been someone who, yes, the SEC is the best conference. I'm a big, just get rid of conferences guy, make these teams schedule their own opponents, because I think if you do that, you might see some more traveling. You might see, some relationships between teams built that you wouldn't expect. And you'd see more crossover. And I think, quite honestly, yes, the SEC is better than the Big 12, but if we didn't have that label, I think we'd maybe go into the schedules one by one more detail and go, Alabama played these 12 teams, and here's the strength of 12 teams they play. versus the 12 teams that TCU played. And it would be easier than just going, oh, SEC better than Big 12. And yes, like I think that we can all see that, but we would have a more detailed look at why who Bama has played is better than who TCU has played.
Yeah, it's funny. Like if somebody said it last night, and I was like, I thought it was an unfair question, but it was a cool one to like kind of ponder on a little bit. If Alabama had TCU schedule and TCU had Alabama schedule, what would be the record? It means absolutely nothing in terms of the actual, committee. But I have a hard time finding 7 wins or 8 wins for TCU on that schedule. Like, are they going to go into? Do they go into Death Valley and beat LSU neutral at a night game? Do they go into Tennessee at a 2:30 game and beat Tennessee? Do they go into Ole Miss and beat Ole Miss? That's a close game. From what I've seen, for TCU's run defense, Quinshawn Judkins probably runs for 220 yards on that game. Now, do they stop does Ole Miss defense stop them? Fair question to ask. Do they go into Mississippi State and stop Leach and those guys offensively? I don't. My point is, and they played Texas and they beat Texas 17-10. So we do have that. But Alabama played Texas week 2 on the road with banged up with a bunch of injuries, 17 penalties, and still find a way to win. To me, that says a lot about Alabama and Texas. On their worst day, they beat the team that was your best win. And I still think the Ole Miss and Mississippi State are better wins than Texas. They played tougher competition, a little bit better teams. But I say all that to say, like, the 12-team playoff to me is going to like continue the imbalance in recruiting, in my opinion, because of NIL. I think NIL has ensured that the rich get richer. Because who are you talking about when you talk about maybe these schools that have a little bit of resources can use them better? I think Texas and Notre Dame are the only two that really have the resources to compete with the elites that are already recruiting at the top level. And Notre Dame is doing a damn good job right now. They have the number 2 recruiting class in the country. And Texas is Texas. They have good recruits, but they can't get out of their own way as far as the monopolization of the money and who wants the power and who wants to say who Archer starting day one, this and this. You know how it goes. But with the NIL, I think it's pretty much assured that the rich get richer. Everybody's talking about NIL is going to kill Alabama, kill Saban, and I'm like, he has the best recruit class he's ever had this year. Like coming in, I hate it for the sport because I think people are being short-sighted with the expansion. Because think about how much it means for TCU right now to get into the playoff. Now it's like, who cares? Like you might be able to get in, but you got to play Alabama first round. That would be maybe a first round match. The way the season gets broken down and who gets the first round buys and the at-large bids and those matchups, TCU's not, jumping up and down to play Alabama first round or go on the road to play Ohio State or whoever it may be. I think, or Tennessee, they hadn't beat Alabama in 20 years. You think that win meant a lot because they just want to be Alabama? No, they thought they had changed the guard and had a chance to like be the best team. Now it's like we might have to play them again and like on a neutral field. It means a little bit less during the regular season to me now. I kind of hate that for the sport, but I won't spend too much time on it. It is what it is. The rich are going to get richer. Parity doesn't exist in college football for a reason, and you're going to see Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia every year. Clemson's going to be right there. Hell, if Clemson started as a kid, Klug, they'd probably be undefeated right now because they look like a totally different team with him running that offense. And the best teams are the best teams for a reason, year in and year out, and they'll be there again.
But also, we've seen some changes, and it's weird because maybe the BCS we saw it more. If you looked at the top 4 teams during the BCS, it would have really been different every year. And it's like this is a study. Like we're trying to figure out exactly what creates more parity, and I think we've accidentally kind of moved in a direction that's lessened it. And it's very well possible that the 12 team even makes it worse. And you're right. But it's strange because like when I was in middle school and high school, like the Pac-12 and SEC, I think were butting heads as like the best conferences. And we really saw a lack of Pac-12 versus SEC. There were like no games where the teams played each other. You had that Oregon-Auburn national championship. Auburn wins on a last second field goal. Like, okay, cool. Like, like close game, like could have gone either way. And I think Nick Saban obviously like is the one who elevates that conference eventually, and SEC eventually we see it becomes a better conference. Pac-12 has like now a really bad stretch of about a decade where they just haven't been good. And the Big Ten emerges, and they're like the other conference. It's like challenging the SEC, except for the Big Ten is stuck in like this old-fashioned brand of football where they're like pound it. We're gonna have 2 fullbacks, and when they go up against an SEC team, it's like all right, we're spread and we're scoring 50, and good luck. Like it hasn't really worked. So there's so many factors to this that it's just teams to do a better job hiring, quite frankly. We're like recycling the same coaches over and over again. Like Hugh Freeze is still a name that's being thrown around. Like, great. Like, Auburn's going to bring him in. Like, I don't know if they are or not. I haven't really followed that thing. But
yeah, he is. He's there.
Deion Sanders is very exciting to me because I think he's the type of guy who gives Colorado a chance. And I don't think like there's going to be a lot of Deons around. I really don't. Like, there's only one Deion, but
right.
we have to try different people because you might find a Deion if you try to get a new guy. You need somebody, coaches in college are not the same as they are in the NFL. You need someone who's going to run a company, quite frankly. Some people are extremely good at managing, football teams and making, calling plays. And then, like, I think Peter DeBoer up in Washington is going to be an NFL guy at some point because he's just got great game plans and in-game coaching strategy is fantastic. But I don't look at him as like a guy who is going to be a Nick Saban and build up that recruitment to a point where they're like 5 stars left and right. I think he's more of an NFL guy. Matt Rule is a guy who is like a college coach and could turn around Nebraska if he fits culturally with them. And I just think that thought process needs to be examined more where you're hiring CEOs. And it's a word that's thrown around. I think people understand it, but they don't really practice what they preach.
Right. 100% agree there for sure. I'm excited to see Prime in Colorado simply because of the portal. Like, there is no drop off here. Like, he can go win games. The Pac-12 is pretty good at the top. I think they have 4 or 5 legit teams, but 6 to 12 is pretty bad. They could go from 1-11 this year with the portal guys that he's bringing in, the kids he's bringing from Jackson State. I don't know if you saw it tweeted, but Trey Sanders, who's a running back for Alabama, he announced he's going into the portal. He said, he tweeted at Coach Prime, "Do you have a spot for me?" Javion Cohen, who started 25 games for Alabama, really good guy, hasn't given up a sack in his entire career. He's trying to go to Colorado. The guys that want to go play for Prime, he can make this thing pretty seamless, and he can do it pretty fast because of the portal and because of the way recruiting is now. He had another guy. He had 2 5-star commitments from high school commit yesterday on his first day on the job. Like, that's how fast this thing goes now. And like you said, it's exciting because you're giving a guy like that a chance, especially with the way the infrastructure is set up in college football right now. You can go fast, man. It doesn't have to be this long, drawn-out rebuild that it used to be.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting. Well, we can talk a lot more about it. I know we're kind of getting to the point where people got places to be and things to do. So last thing I'll ask, nothing has really changed in terms of the betting odds for Heisman, despite the fact that USC didn't win this past weekend. Both of you guys, or I shouldn't say both, Max and Kyron both said that Caleb Williams, I believe you both said that Caleb Williams is the likely pick at this point. So I would imagine that hasn't changed. I don't think Blake Corum played, so he wasn't able to, change his standing with that at all. I mean, I don't think we've talked about this much, Nick, because you haven't been on the college football episodes. But do you guys have any final opinions on the Heisman watch before we call it a day and wait for another week of football to start? I'm acting like there's no Monday night game tonight, but I guess that's just my mentality.
I mean, I think it probably should end up being Caleb. It's just such a weird. It feels like that year where Tom Brady won MVP and like everyone else who was in contention got hurt, and it's just like who do you pick? Fine, Tom Brady. Like, he's the one guy who made it to the end of the year and played really well, so we're gonna give it to him. And good for the kid. He's from DC, so I'll support him. But they had a disappointing end of their season, and he got hurt in the last game too, so that they probably would have lost anyways. But
yeah, they played 2 good defenses all year. They win 1 and 2 in those games, and so I mean, like, Caleb's a good player. The funniest thing is, I think Bryce Young had more Heisman moments than anybody this year. The Texas game, Tennessee game, LSU game, Ole Miss game. They just happened to lose 2 of those games on the last second, and it was because of the defense. So he had his chance to win it. I think even Max Duggan had a chance to maybe make a little bit of a push there if they had won that game, that Big 12 championship game, and he was able to come back and lead them to a victory. Maybe he had a chance. But the funniest thing out of all of this is Stetson Bennett is sitting there, and I don't think he's deserving of it at all. I mean, he's the bus driver on a high grade bus that you just get it there. You just don't crash the ship, right? But I saw a huge push for him. He's winning fan votes. I think there was 300,000 votes they polled on Twitter. Stetson Bennett was polled either 1 or 2 in both of those, which is like weird to see. So I think there's a weird Stetson Bennett push here at the end. because Georgia's dominant. They won the SEC championship by 20 points, and you kind of see his numbers start to get up there a little bit. But I think Caleb should win it, but it'll be funny to see who they pick as finalists, because I think that'll say a lot about how they view the season.
This is just such a narrative. These awards are like narrative awards. Max Duggan easily could be the guy if he just like had like a bigger name, was more on social media. And like, I think there's like a fatigue thing with Bryce Young, where like people just don't want him to win again because he won last year. And like, he probably is deserving of it as well, just because of how much he had to deal with at Bama. You know, it's
right. Why is Jalen Carter and Will Anderson? Why aren't they being talked about? You know, like, and Will didn't have as good as a year as he had last year, but in my opinion, it was more impressive. They had a 240-pound guy playing 4I in the SEC, and he still led the league in tackles for loss stats. He's still top 10 in the country in tackles for loss stats. He's top 5 in pressures. Like, had an incredible year playing out of position. So, like you said, it's just a narrative award. The actual best players in football, most of the time, aren't quarterbacks. Most of the time, aren't those skill guys, and you just don't really see them get the love. But like you said, man, we got stuff. I'm actually late right now. The portal is insane. Braylon Allen, who's one of the best running backs in college football, just jumped into the portal. So that's absolutely insane news. Anthony Richardson just declared for the draft. So I got a lot of stuff I got to get here to do. So a lot of stuff happening right now. But appreciate you guys, man. Great show today.
Oh, Max, we can't hear you.
Max,
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, our structure was less specific today, so we kind of ran long with some stuff. So we did. We're a little late. But Kyron, let everybody know where they can find you real quick, and we'll let you be on your way, brother.
Yeah, follow me right here at Kyron Samuels right there on the name tag, and then you'll get everything else on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter, and you'll get everything else, man. Appreciate you guys. All
right, man. We'll let you go now. Have a good one. Nick, it was cool having you on the recap show. We'll see if we can't make this a consistent thing and get a little bit more efficient with everything. But it'll be cool because Max will be on next week, so we can have you both at the same time, hopefully. Let everybody know where they can find you and everything that you do, of course. And we will see you at the very least on Thursday to talk about. What do you want to talk about? Should we decide now, live on air?
Oh, man. I mean, we could talk about we haven't really talked about free agency at all. Maybe we'll do a little preview of that, actually, because I haven't really looked at it. It might be a good week to take a peek at like who's going to be available.
We can talk about upcoming free agency and maybe take a little bit of a closer look at the current top draft order if we wanted to do that.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, I have some takes on valuing picks and like what positions I think are going to go in what spots, so we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I only briefly touched on some of my research from last year where guys can be found. This might be a great time to kind of look a little bit deeper into that, talk about the upcoming free agents and picks as well. But sounds good, man. So let everybody know where they could find you till then.
Other side, Nick with Sports, tagged right there on Twitter, and you'll get everything you need from me there. All
right, beautiful. Thanks again to Noah Ashley, our producer. Appreciate you very much. And we will see everybody this coming Thursday. That being said,
this podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.